Today we are changing sprockets, chain and Cush Drive on the Royal Enfield Himalayan. Now, the weather's no great, it's a bit too windy, so we're going to be working in the garage today. What is that? Is that a ram's horn? Oh my god, have you been eating sheep? Right folks, when you are replacing sprockets on a motorcycle, then it's always a good idea to do the front first. And the reason for that is we're using the rear brake and the rear sprocket along with the chain as a lock for the front sprocket. And that'll become apparent when we do this. These bolts come off very easily, folks. They're just little 8mm bolts. Just take your front sprocket cover off. Right, top tip when you're doing this job, folks, get your chain nice and tight, almost over tighten it. You don't want too much flex in there. You want it nice and tight because we're taking this big 30mm bolt off. So the less movement in this chain, the better. So there's a locking washer here that's just folded over. That's just to help lock this nut in place. It's a soft washer. I don't want to break it, but I just want to work that loose again. Get yourself a screwdriver and just tap it under that fold and straighten it out. We'll just put a little bit of WD-40 in there. Whilst we let WD-40 soak in, let's look at chains and sprockets. The chain is a 525 pitch 110 link chain. The front sprocket is a 15 tooth and the rear sprocket is a 38 tooth. Now that's the original gearing setup on the Himalayan. What I have on here at the moment, I changed these maybe, I don't know, 8 months ago, something like that. I've got a 16 tooth front sprocket, so one up from this, a 38 tooth on the rear, which again is the same as what I'm about to replace it with, but the chain on there is a 525 pitch 112 link, and that's because I've got a bigger front sprocket. Now I'm going back to a 1538 setup with a 110 link. Oh, and whilst we're at it, before I forget, I'm also going to be replacing the rear Cush Drive. Yeah, the one I've got here is worn out. They stand in the rear brake, which locks the rear sprocket, which in turn locks the chain and allows me to then crack that off. It's better if you have an extension bar on here to take this away from the bike, but it is what it is. I just need to do with what I've got. Now I'm standing in the rear brake, as I said. I'm holding the front just to help hold the bike in place, and then I'm going to push this forward. Okay, I think I'm going to need a little bit more leverage on there, folks. Nightmare. Now what we're seeing here is probably my fault. I've over tightened that the last time I changed the front sprocket. In reality, folks, this job should only take maybe 20-30 minutes. An hour at a push. It's going to take me an hour because I'm faffing around with you know, cameras and whatnot. So we're going to get this off using Archimedes' principle of leverage. We have a socket, a bar and a long pole. Okay, so again, rear foot on the brake, push this forward, make sure that's on nice and tight. Now, I'm doing this one-handed, it's not exactly clever. Crack! Haha! You hear that crack? That's it. Job done. So as soon as you crack that nut, it'll come off really easily. There we have it. To make my life a little bit easier, because my chain's really tight, all I want to do is just loosen this off, loosen the chain again, and then I'm going to pull that front sprocket off. So obviously the job was needing done anyway, but the main catalyst for doing this, I'm going away, trip round Europe in a couple of weeks. So I'm getting all of these maintenance type jobs done, ready for my trip. Hey, there we go. There we go. That's the very manky 16 tooth front sprocket. You see how it's worn, yeah. Once they start to go like that, they start to damage your chain. Giving that a bit of a rough clean out. I will clean it properly before I put the new sprocket back on. See the movement on there. That's how we know we need a new Cush Drive. Now a little bit's fine, but that's getting excessive now. Not a great idea to sit this down on the brake disc. Just done this for demonstration purposes. But we just lift this off. There's your sprocket, and there's your Cush rubbers. So I'm just going to pull those ones out. Fun fact, folks, Cush rubbers were actually invented by Royal Enfield in 1912. That's how far back they go. And all they do is they dampen those forces, you know, the acceleration, the gear changes, because metal on metal is never a good idea. So the rubbers there, it dampens those forces so that there's less wear on your drivetrain, on your sprockets. But if we put them against the sprocket carrier here, you can see how they sit inside the hub. This will feel like a new bike when I put this on. New sprockets, new chain, you know, new Cush rubbers, everything's nice and tight. It's like gunk and grease that gathers up in here, because obviously you're lubricating your chain, that gets flung off, it's all greasy and sticky, then all the mud starts to stick to it, and the process goes round and round and round, you know, and it's often quite tough to get into these areas when the chains are on and stuff like that. So this is a good chance to get it nice and clean. Now folks, rather than wrestle around with this on the floor, the easiest way to do it is just put your axle back in, put your socket carrier back on there, and you see we've got an 8mm Allen key here and a 14mm socket, again on a decent bar. Okay, so we have another side-by-side comparison here. You can see how these are quite well spaced out, they're quite well worn. These teeth are much tighter, a lot more life to them. Again, there's your carrier. Of course, it goes without saying, but you want to get that cleaned up. I've given that a bit of a wipe, but I'm going to give it a proper clean. Of course, grease your bearings and all that stuff before you put it back on the bike. Right, I've got two chains, folks. I've always got spare chains. So here we've got a JT chain. I've used these in the past. I'm always really happy with them. This is a roll-on chain. I'm not saying one good, one's bad. I just know that I can rely on this. If you look at the size of the links, the same pitch, same number of links, etc. But these ones don't look anywhere near as sturdy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that JT chain back on the bike. Not back on the bike, it's a new chain obviously. There's the old one there. But I'm going to stick with the JT and I'll keep the roll-on as a spare. Okay, a bit of a wrestle, folks, as you can see, especially with new sprockets front and rear and a brand new chain, everything is really, really tight. So you can see how far forward this is. And obviously I haven't tightened the axle up or anything yet because I've still got to put the plate on here, and I still need to crank that sprocket tight at the front. So we're doing everything in reverse, if you like. I can't really tighten that up until I get this locked up. Again, same principle as we did before. We need to get the back brake on, use the chain to lock everything up.